The Saturday of the Miami Grand Prix turned out to be complete chaos and has resulted in a fight between multiple drivers and the FIA after some questionable decisions during the sprint race. This started with Fernando Alonso stating that he feels that the Miami Grand Prix weekend shows how nationality matters in F1 investigation outcomes, and he intends to address his concerns with FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem. But this wasn't the only questionable decision during this weekend, and an important note: Lewis Hamilton was involved in almost all of them. So Alonso, who complained loudly this year about the penalties he suffered in the Australian Grand Prix and the Chinese Grand Prix sprint, said he felt singled out after Lewis Hamilton escaped without punishment following an opening lap collision in the Miami sprint. Hamilton dived down the inside of Turn 1, and Alonso crashed with teammate Lance Stroll, who was going in from the outside. As a result of the chain reaction, Stroll and McLaren's Lando Norris retired, while Alonso and Hamilton's Mercedes teammate George Russell were also forced to fight from the back. When asked if the FIA should give a punishment, Alonso said, "We'll see what they decide. I guess they won't decide anything because he's not Spanish. But I think he ruined the race for a few people, especially Norris, who had a very fast car and was out in that incident." Alonso stated that, having received penalties in recent races, he did not want to take any chances in overtaking other cars once he was near the back. "Maybe today I didn't get penalised, but I always get penalised," he said. "Today, the same thing. I was behind Ocon, I could maybe take a risk and overtake him, but logically I don't take the risk to avoid being penalised. So, I tried to complete the race, which is 19 laps, and go back to the team to talk about the changes." Alonso said that the sprint effectively served as a test session for him and the team, allowing them to better understand tyre degradation for the major Grand Prix. "We didn't have any interest in the sprint race," he said. "We were just going to check degradation and things for tomorrow, and at the end we managed it. For us, it's a free practice. It's not really a race." For several races, Aston Martin has been concerned about how some of the FIA race stewards' rulings are affecting its drivers. Alonso received a penalty in Australia for possibly risky driving after the extreme way in which he slowed down for a bend caused a collision for George Russell's trailing Mercedes. In China, Alonso was punished again for making sideways contact with Carlos Sainz in the sprint race, while Stroll was fined for sliding into the rear of Daniel Ricciardo under the safety car, decisions that team manager Mike Crack found frustrating and unfair. In the Miami sprint, the Spaniard was on the receiving end of Lewis Hamilton's aggressive charge down the inside at the start of the race, resulting in a four-car incident involving his teammate Lance Stroll and McLaren's Lando Norris. Hamilton was later cleared by the FIA, and the later published verdict read, "From the video evidence, it appeared that there were at least 3 collisions that occurred. The first between cars 14, Alonso, and 18, Stroll, and then between car 44, Hamilton, and car 14, Alonso, and finally between car 18, Stroll, and car 4, Norris. While it appeared to us that the incidents began with cars 14 and 18, the sudden and fast arrival of car 44 contributed to the various collisions. However, we were not able to identify one or more drivers wholly or predominantly to blame for the various collisions or any one of them." The stewards also stated that their judgment was impacted by F1's existing policy of being more lenient for first lap accidents than for those on later laps of the race. Alonso's stance remained unchanged following the Grand Prix qualifying session later that day. "I had to open the gap, which led to contact with Stroll, because Hamilton was coming from the inside without control of the car. If I do that, for sure I get the penalty," he protested, and he stated that he maintained his initial claim. Yeah, sure. I do feel that nationality matters, and I will speak with Mohammed Ben Sulayem, with the FIA, whatever. I need to make sure that there is not anything wrong with nationality or anything that can influence any decision. Not only for me, but also for the future generation of Spanish drivers. They need to be protected." But these actions and strong words from Alonso is only half the story, as after this all happened on lap 1, Hamilton was in a huge fight with Magnussen for the remainder of the race, which resulted in way too many too close moments, which did result in a lot of penalties. And Kevin Magnussen thinks his 4 Miami Grand Prix Formula 1 sprint race penalties were well-deserved for his stupid tactics against Lewis Hamilton, but he believes his actions saved Haas points. Magnussen received 3 10-second time penalties for frequently leaving the track and obtaining an advantage, as well as a 5-second penalty and a black and white warning flag for exceeding track restrictions during Saturday afternoon's 19-lap race at Hard Rock Stadium. The stewards called him for alleged unsportsmanlike actions. His antics all occurred against Hamilton while they were trailing Nico Hülkenberg, who went on to score 2 points for Haas in 7th position as Hamilton was delayed by Magnussen's tactics. These included bypassing the circuit's tight chicane and twice sliding off track while battling Hamilton, once barging into the Mercedes' right side. "All the penalties were well deserved," Magnussen said after the race. "No doubt about it. But I had to play the game again. I was in a very good position behind Nico there. At the beginning of the race, I gained a lot positions, was up in P8 and protecting well from Lewis because I had DRS from Nico and had good pace. But then Nico cut the chicane, and I lost the DRS on lap 6 in an incident that was not investigated. Nico could have given that back to give me the DRS to protect because then we would have easily been P7, P8. Instead, I was really vulnerable to Lewis and we started fighting like crazy. I started using these stupid tactics, which I don't like doing," he added. "But at the end of the day, I did my job as a team player. Nico scored his points because I got that gap for him. Lewis and Tsunoda couldn't catch him, not the way I like to go racing at all, but was what I had to do today." Lewis Hamilton praised Kevin Magnussen for acknowledging that his ultra-defensive, stupid tactics in Miami's Formula 1 sprint race were motivated by a desire to help his team. "I mean, it's really honest of him. I think it's pretty cool," Hamilton said. "We had a good race. It was a little bit on the edge in some places, but that is what I love. I love racing hard. So for me, it wasn't really frustrating or anything. That is obviously what you do to work as a team. So bravo." The stewards called Magnussen for suspected unsportsmanlike conduct, and this resulted in the stewards intending to discuss a potential adjustment in the use of Formula 1 penalties after clearing Kevin Magnussen of suspected unsportsmanlike behaviour in the sprint race. According to the stewards' report, the driver candidly explained that he believed he was entitled to race with car 44 in the manner that he did, and that he was willing to accept what he considered to be standard penalties that would have been imposed on him for any infringements that occurred while he was battling for position. He was also of the view that building a gap between himself and the cars ahead was perfectly within the regulations, and it was not uncommon for a driver to seek to assist his teammate in the course of a race by doing so. He did not at any point in time think that what he was doing was wrong or that it was in any way unsportsmanlike. He highlighted that the stewards would typically not increase the severity of the penalties for repeat offences. The stewards found that there was no clear evidence of an intention to behave in a manner that can be said to be unsportsmanlike, and that no further punishment should be taken against Magnussen owing to the high threshold imposed for assessing unsportsmanlike behaviour. However, the report made it clear that the stewards disagreed with the way in which car 20 was driven. Given Magnussen's repeated infractions, the report stated that discussions will take place about regulatory changes that would give stewards greater discretion in raising the severity of driver sanctions. The report continued, "Moving forward, the stewards will need to consider if, in appropriate situations, especially in the case of repeat infringements, the penalties to be applied for each infringement need to be increased to discourage scenarios such as those that we found today. This is something that we will raise explicitly with the FIA and the stewarding team." What are your thoughts on all the situations with the FIA and the stewards? Should the rules be even more clear? Or should they just be more straightforward in handing out penalties? So are you Camp Alonso of Camp FIA on this one? Let me know in the comments down below.